Well, thank you very much, Hamidu, there for the background there. Now, joining us to begin our conversation this morning, borders on electricity subsidy for public universities and hospitals. Let me introduce here in the studio for the first time. Let me just launch him. That is Mohammed Mahmood Raji. Is the professor of neurosurgery and Chief Medical Director, National Hospital, Abuja. Prof, you're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, we also have another professor joining us, but this time via Zoom and female. It's a pleasure to welcome to Good Morning Nigeria, all the way from Benin City via Zoom, Professor Lilian Salami, the Vice Chancellor of University of Benin. Good to have you again, ma'am. Good morning to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
We want to stay with you, Professor Lilian, because we know that you are the chairman of universities' vice chancellors. So let's just get your view. How did your association actually received the news of the subsidy? You know, just recently, about a few weeks ago, we have different university students protesting over this rationing of electricity in their campuses and all that. But with this subsidy now, how did you receive the association? How did you receive the news?
Thank you very much. I think to put our place on record, we want to most sincerely thank the Mr. President, His Excellency, for at least taking this position and his positive dispensation to our plight. However, I want to put place on record how we got to where we are now, if you permit me. When this came on board, that's the increased tariff in April. We actually took a position as the CVC, and then we wrote to His Excellency through our Honorable Minister that once this is implemented, we are going to have very terrible consequences on the university or the governance of the university. Vis-a-vis, the lack of funds to actually pay, and that a lot of universities may actually go bankrupt. And then the second effect actually we felt would be even when a lot of us worry about the output of research carried out in universities, that this was going to bring a total, closure to research output from the university. And thirdly, that it will lead to unrest, whether by staff and students. That was our position. And then we went on to give possible, remedies in how to deal with this increase in subsidy, tariff, and that the universities actually would prefer a situation where either we return to status quo, one, or have a special dedicated tariff for universities, bearing in mind of our peculiarity and then the lack of funds that we are dealing with in the system. And thirdly, also, that the government could actually empower universities to drive and get alternative electricity resources to the university. So these were the positions that we actually, sent through our Honorable Minister to His Excellency, Mr. President. So we are happy that something has come out of that. And so we want to most sincerely thank His Excellency, the President, over this 50% subsidy to the high increased tariff. And I'm sure as the discussion will move on, we'll look at how this is going to affect the system, if there are positive or negative effects. Thank you very much.
All right, many thanks, Professor Salami, for your opening comment as regards this. Let's get back here in the studio. We have joining us now for the conversation, Jide Ojo, Public Affairs Analyst. Many thanks for joining us, sir.
My pleasure.
All right, but let's hear the views of Professor Mohammed Mahmood Raji on this subsidy. Sometime back, the National Hospital experienced blackouts as a result of, inability to pay electricity bill, generator not functioning optimally and all of that. So with this news. What would be your take? You think it's the right step in the right direction?
Let me join my distinguished Vice Chancellor, the chairman of the Vice Chancellors, to really commend the President of the Republic of Nigeria for taking this wonderful step. As far as we are concerned, it's a huge, huge, huge relief, actually. It's not, would have wished to have more, but at least what we have is really, really very good. I'll take you down the memory lane. Early this year, we had to write a letter from the National Hospital to our coordinating Minister of Health, to the Permanent Secretary. That was even before the tariff was raised in April. So we stated that from the 2nd of January to the 25th of March, even without the tariff, we have spent close to ₦500 billion on generation of electricity, from the bills of grid and buying diesel. And that is not just unique to the National Hospital. It's what afflicts all the tertiary hospitals, and I would say all the hospitals in the country. And with the scarce resources we have, it would be difficult for you to really pay from the subventions from the government to pay this. So it has brought a lot of strain. And then mind you, when you look at a hospital, it's different from operating some ordinary offices. An office would open from 8 in the morning, closes at 4, and then likely, even if you have to push it, it gets to 5 or 6. But in the hospital, there has to be like 24 hours. And not only 24 hours, there are some machines that you never ever should switch off. If you switch off, the cost of bringing them back on will be so enormous. And then there are some machines that when you switch them off, it costs lives. For instance, when you are talking about our incubators for babies, the ventilators that some patients are in the ICU, like in National Hospital now, we have like 5 to 6 ICUs. There are times when all these ICUs will be on, patients will be on ventilators, they'll be full. So you can imagine a light going off for up to 30 minutes, the batteries may not last up to 30 minutes. So it means a life would go. So it's quite disturbing. And then when the tariff got raised from April, the bill became too astronomical, so that it became completely unrealistic for hospitals to pay. So we really had to be crying out to our coordinating minister, to the Minister of State, to the Permanent Secretary, and I really must commend them for what they have done. They have been up and doing. Virtually in every forum that they are able to appear, they would voice out our cries. And I'm aware that there are a series of meetings that have been taking place with the Ministry of Power in this regard, 1 or 2 of which I happen to be privileged to be a part of. And that has been pushed now to the presidency, along with what the educational sector has also been going through and what they've been pushing. We can now see that the collaboration had worked. And that tells me that the current government is a listening government, and we are really happy that they're able to listen to us and do this. This not only affects us as the CEOs or staff of these hospitals and educational institutions, but it also assists the ordinary Nigerian.
Well, thank you very much for your opening remarks there, Professor Mahmood, the Medical Director of the National Hospital, Abuja. Thank you so much. Let me just bring in Jide Ojo into this conversation. You have heard about the subsidy, and also you've been listening to the conversation so far. What impact do you think will have this removal, this subsidy that the government has given to the public sector, that is the education and the health sector? What kind of impact would it have on the quality of delivery of services in these two critical institutions?
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians. I think I join my senior colleagues on the panel to appreciate the administration of President Bola Tinubu for coming up with the idea of the 50% subsidy. But let's look at the future. I I don't think you can keep that, even the 50% that is expected by those institutions to be offset. How do they offset it? Let me give you the instance of University of Lagos. I'm a proud alumni of University of Lagos, graduated in the early 90s. The Vice Chancellor said the energy bill alone is 1 billion. 1 billion. That's public, the one by Eco Electricity Distribution Company, out of which they paid 180 million. So even if the government intervenes and give them 500 million, there will still be a shortfall of 320 million as at now.
Is it monthly or yearly?
Well, I don't know for how long they accumulated that, but what I learned, and it's in the news, University of Lagos was disconnected by Eco Electricity last week. So the bottom line is that I think, particularly for our universities, we need to find a lasting solution. For instance, why should we have universities with sciences, technology-based courses, and with the liberalization, if I can call it, in the energy sector, that individuals, communities, companies can now invest in electricity, generate, distribute, and consume. I think our universities need to lead the pack. Even if it will cost them like 5 billion now, if they need to go and borrow money to be off the national grid, if each of these federal state universities could have self-sufficiency in energy production, that is when they will be off this. Because there is no guarantee that this electricity tariff in another few months or year will not be increased. And that brings us, that's number one. That brings us to the idea of, can the current funding mechanism for our hospitals and the universities or tertiary institutions, can it sustain them? Because just like Prof said, again, let me give you the example of University College Hospital Ibadan. Was it last year or early this year? The light of UCH was also disconnected for when about 490 million. And the institution wanted to start charging electricity bill on the patient, and they had to be stopped. Now, how do you run an hospital without electricity? How do you run an academic institutions without electricity? And if the billing is so high, you will not also be able to provide the social service, because these are social services. Education, health is under the social services. So I think government needs to be, yes, 50% reduction, good way to start. But what does the future, can we have a roadmap, can we have a blueprint of what will make each of these hospitals, each of these universities to be self-sufficient, so that they don't even have to be built? There have been so much talk about energy mix, solar, everybody, there are people who are saying go solar, go solar, go solar. Can solar power an hospital sustainably? Can we look at wind or any other source of energy that will not expose them? Because now that the energy sector has been privatized, you cannot ask those discos not to charge cost recovery price for their product unless you are going to continue to subsidize. And in as much as the value of the currency has depreciated, they themselves will have to, from time to time,
keep
because
increasing.
they're also owing banks. in billions. They're also owing banks. And some of them, in fact, AMCO has taken over one or two of them because of they defaulted in repayment of their debts to banks. So we need to find a more creative way,
out of the
a
challenge.
sustainable way to deal with this energy crisis in the social sector.
Many thanks, Judy Oje. You have made a very valid point, and I would like Professor Lillian Salami to respond, to your point about universities thinking about generating their own electricity. You would expect that for a school like University of Benin, you have a very vast faculty of engineering.
Exactly.
Maybe instead of running to the federal government to get subsidy, why not look inward to see how you can be able to generate electricity? Even not, some Nigerians have said, even if it's not to cover the whole institution, at least certain parts of the institution can be covered by the electricity generated by the school. I want to find out your response about that. And then some Nigerians also think that the universities charge fees from students that should be able to cater for some of these expenses. And then universities run businesses too. So tell us, why are universities unable to pay electricity bill despite fees and businesses that they run? And then why are you not looking out for generating your own electricity without depending on the national grid?
Thank you very much. First of all, universities don't charge tuition. What we charge, we call them school charges because they are actually aggregated into the different subheads. So we really don't charge. And then that university gets so much, I can tell you, without much effort, that universities are actually running on very tight budget. So we don't have that much to pay. And then a situation where the 50%, like I said, we welcome that. But let me quickly just illustrate using my own university. I am sure that is what happens to almost every university. So before this hike, we were paying about 80 million per month. And then the hike brought us to about 280 million, giving, in an increment of about 200 million. So we actually the Benin Electrical Distribution Company from our own end here, and actually, discussed with them how we can really get out of this, do some level of settlement. So we had roundtable discussions until a point where we even had to go to court, and that didn't work. Then we came back. Now, if we get, for instance, the 50% subsidy that the federal government has graciously given now or planning to give, that brings it to 140 million a month for us. And then, because of the backlog, which of course all of us are also dealing with, I had to over a period of 7 months, which of course was about 350 million. For some other universities, they are running into billions of naira. So that means every month I'm going to have to pay 190 million. Now, I don't have that kind of resources, and I don't think any university has that kind of resources. So those who think that what we're getting from students, we are not charging fees. If we charge fees, I am sure we'll be able to sustain and pay our bills. But right now, we are not. We are only, having school charges. And these school charges, like I said, have their own subheads that they go to. That is one. The second thing is, can we actually be able to generate our electricity? And a lot of people, I have read that there are professors. What are they professing? We have professors. It's not easy to come by to become a professor. The second thing I always ask such persons or critics is that, do we ever sit back to think of our professors going outside the shores of this country and they are performing wonders, having breakthroughs in research work? What may have happened to such professors? It's not that something to matter. The fact, have any one of us really has anyone the universities to see what the laboratories that we are actually expecting these professors to do magic, breakthroughs? So the issue is that the environment, the school and even resources are not there. We expect a professor that is getting maybe 400,000 naira at the peak to be able to carry out going to work. We are talking about electricity. How do we run a system where you don't have electricity and you want research output? People talk about, can't we develop our own alternative electricity? Of course we can, if we have the conducive environment. And that is why I actually initially gave our own position when CVC wrote to His Excellency on what can be done. If we have the resources and somebody says to us, go ahead and work and find, alternative electricity source. Of course, you have professors that are capable, of doing such and carrying out such research in universities. But the resources are not there. The environment, actually does not allow for that kind of ingenuity or, novelty to come out of our institutions. So we are here, and then it's difficult to really run the universities where we are right today. So the electricity bill, it is not possible. Even with the 50%, I can almost tell you that everyone is still going to be shouting that we cannot really pay our electricity bill, even after the 50%. Like I said, University of Benin, 190 million, if we do the quick arithmetic. Where are we going to get that? I don't think we have that kind of resources. So it's going to be, something has to be done and has to be done. And I think one of our positions is either the government is going to enable the universities to come up with alternative electricity source, or give us special tariff. Even the ad initial one where we're paying 69 naira per kilowatt, we couldn't even sustain that. It was difficult for universities to pay that. In my case, the 80
Professor Lillian, sorry to interrupt your flow of thought, but if I listened to you carefully, you talking about the challenges in the university environment, not being conducive, reasons why professors cannot, venture into such research and all of that. Would that also mean that the students who are being, trained in such universities are also not being given the required, training that they need, to be able to excel in life when they leave? I'm just thinking.
Yeah. The discussion you brought up is whether we're able to develop alternative electricity. In terms of training, and of course, we do not compromise the quality of our students. And that is why when they also go out globally, they actually perform, exceptional in their, competition. So we're not discussing, I'm not saying that we are compromising. The fact is, you cannot take up research to the level where we are expecting that universities should be able to drive and come up with alternative. And that's where I brought that issue of, we can't do just of the, environments that we have. But to think that our students, no, we do not compromise, training our students, and that is why they are competitive when they are outside the shores of this country, and even within the country. So we do not compromise the quality of our students. That is far, we cannot do that, because all of us are working to ensure that we produce graduates are not only futuristic, but are able to compete anywhere in the world.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Lillian, for your contribution there. So let's come back to the studio. Professor Mahmoud, you've listened to Jide and Professor Lillian, and one of the salient points that they raised is probably looking for alternative, to generating electricity so that they can be able to manage effectively because of paucity of funds. Are you also advocating for a special tariff for hospitals as well? And what are the likely challenges that the hospitals are likely to face in the light of this subsidy?
You see, basically the health sector as well as the educational sector have a couple of similarities. We are all social services.
Yeah.
And we do not charge, like she said, they do not charge fees. So also what we charge is not commensurate to the service that it's been delivered. A typical example is, for instance, our cancer center, where we give radiation therapy only. We used to charge 300,000. It jacked up to 600,000. It jacked up to about 800,000. As at last year, November, by the time I asked my team to do an appropriate costing, it was going to cost 1,600,000 per, but we were charging that low tariff of 800,000 so that the ordinary Nigerian will be able to access care. Even then, patients who are on NHIS and a special program called Cancer Health Fund, they were being charged 300,000. Can you imagine how much we are losing per patient? So that means for you to pay even that ordinary, even before this rise in tariff, I told you the amount of money you were paying within in less than 3 months, #500 million naira. Where would you get that money from? Typically, for instance, like in National Hospital, what we were getting per month is 60 million naira for diesel, 60 million naira for grid. That's 120 million per month. Wow. Right? Sorry, that's per year, per annum. That's the whole budget per annum. We sometimes pay 150 million to generate electricity per month, even before the rise in tariff. So in April, when the first bill came, they charged us 116 million, in addition to diesel cost of about 90 million. Of course, it means for us to source that money, we would have to deprive paying people who have supplied us medications, that's drugs, people who have supplied consumables in the lab, people who have supplied consumables in the theater. So it becomes a vicious cycle. If you don't pay a contractor in some of these other segments of the hospital 2 or 3 or 4 months, or 2 or 3 or 4 cycles, of course he'll say, no, I will not supply until you pay me. After all, he's also actually sourcing his money from the banks.
That's true.
So it has become a quagmire for the whole system. So that's even at the electricity tariff of the bill I told you of #500 million naira. It was of previous. So that's what's telling you people were struggling even with that previous tariff.
Okay.
So that's why when the time came for us to write these letters, we said there should be a very special tariff for us. And it's a coincidence that a good coincidence that even those in the education sector are also asking for the same.
Professor Raji, I'd like to ask a question. You talked about the NHIA and talked about the fact that patients under that scheme get to pay less than what they should pay. I thought the way the scheme operates is that you're being reimbursed the balance, some other time. Let us know how that works. That's one. Then two, you talked about consumables and you're paying with what you get, the subvention you get from the federal government. So what happens to the bills that the patients pay? That's two. Then three, for a hospital like the National Hospital, for example, you charge almost at par with some private institutions, hospitals. The difference very slim. I'm talking about the National Hospital. The difference very slim in some, maybe not cancer like you mentioned, but of course other health services that you render. So if private institutions can function without any form of assistance from the government in terms of paying salaries, in terms of allocation and all of that, why is the National Hospital having a challenge?
You have got your facts wrong, completely wrong, on all those three that you've mentioned. If you're talking about NHIA, except about a few weeks ago when they said that they were raising some tariffs by 60%, the tariff was never changed for 12 years. So if you are buying chloroquine, even let me say 2 years ago, or let me say Lona, 2 years ago, at 350. As of now, if you go to the shop, how much do you get it? At least 2,500 to 3,000. And we were expected to give that, but when, to give the patients at 2,500, but at a tariff of the previous 12 years ago that was set. You understand? Of 3,500.
So how do private hospitals who are also under the NHIA scheme operate?
That's why some of these private hospitals, they have a different set of medications. They go and buy very cheap drugs to sell for patients. Sometimes with the risk of that is you give drugs that are really not very effective, fake drugs and things like that. You understand? So, and it has caused a lot of problems. Most public hospitals some private hospitals actually shun away from NHIA patients. I'm sure you're aware. National Hospital has 70% of the patients are NHIA patients. So you can imagine the bleeding we are suffering from. Fortunately, now that with the new...
If a hospital is bleeding, who takes care of that?
Of course, as a CEO, that's why we're crying out. You understand? And it's out of the bigger resources that you have that you are able to do these little things. And somebody was talking about alternative energy. Okay, still, let me call back to for instance, our charges in National Hospital. You have got that fact right. I mean, that fact very, very wrong. It's never even close to what you find at the National Hospital, at the private facility. Not even close. If you have our surgeries, for instance, a major surgery, a neurosurgery, that should be charged 5 to 6 million naira elsewhere, 10 million somewhere, you have it at 350 to 450,000 at the National Hospital. That's how many percent rebate? So it's cost across all our sets of services. When you see deliveries, which is one of the commonest things that people see, in fact, a number of times when patients go to some hospitals here in Abuja, they say, no, go to National, we'll have you almost for free, but especially if you're an NHIA patient. When you go to a private hospital here, in fact, I know a hospital where they charge 15 million for a CS. So you cannot compare with the National Hospital where you just go and pay some few, in fact, less than 100,000. So those are where people need to really have facts right. Maybe if you come into the hospital, see what we do, you might be our advocate these days. And he mentioned something about alternative energy. A number of the hospitals have tried to get that working. Unfortunately, it's also not as easy. People would think that these things are easy, but they are not. First, you come with, they give you an envelope during budget appropriations, an envelope budget of, say, 2 billion naira. When you need to expand your services, you need to fix some big machines. You need to buy some more new machines. You need to buy the things people would use in the ORs within this 2 billion naira. And then you are expected to get a source of alternative energy. I assure you that thing is really not cheap. If you are talking about solar power now, for you to set up a system, you have to spend billions of naira. If you are to, hospitals, like we said, are high energy consuming entities. So, like the National Hospital now, yes, we have tried in this 2024 budget to start setting up, what do you call them, solar systems. Okay. And also, graciously, the Federal Minister of Health, the ministers have really worked hard to get some special intervention from government to get solar power or alternative energy into some hospitals. They have selected some for this season. By next year, they will do some others, so like that. But then it will not be able to cover for all the systems. And then there are some certain equipment, like the equipment in some big hospitals, like National Hospital, that when they are on, or when you're putting them on, there's so much energy consumption at once. So are you sure solar will be able to provide that surge in energy that you need at once? So that's why the question of energy mix comes in. And we, at the National Hospital, when I came in, one thing I made sure was that there must be light. If you go to National Hospital, from, let me say, from the second week that I came till now, light never goes off beyond a few seconds. You can go and test. Once light goes off for up to 1 minute, then there must be a very, very serious problem. And I think that's...
So how have you been surviving with that? Have you been able to meet up with that?
That's why we are crying out. It's really difficult.
All right.
It's really difficult.
Okay.
So we have also gotten some other private organizations to come present to us, see how they will be able to set up their own systems, whether gas plants, CNGs, or whatever, or solar, and then they give us tariff that we'll pay over time. Then we'll be something like BOQ, or we can just keep running a PPP till forever. But then even that, because of the cost of putting this infrastructure in place, they have to also borrow from the bank. The charges from the banks are about 30% now, I think. So that also goes back onto us. The tariff they give us, by the time you make a calculation, you discover that it's also exorbitant. It's really some very, very difficult thing. I think this needs critical thinking, where all the important stakeholders will need to come, sit down, look at a a workable solution long term.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Mahmood.
Thank you.
The critical stakeholders still need to converge to examine the, workable solution and long term. But at least this immediate short-term assistance that government has given to these critical sectors now. We've examined, Jide, let me bring you in now. We've examined the challenges despite this subsidy now. But we still know that there are benefits. When we look at this subsidy, it will go a long way, just like Professor Mahmood said and Professor Lillian noted. At least it will ease the tension in these two critical sectors. Now, we're looking at the implementation now, because another major challenge that they may face is the implementation or the disbursement of this subsidy. How do you advise that this, be handled?
Well, the good news is that in this century, 21st century, data is life. You work with data. And with the click of a button, you know how many of these institutions are going to benefit. I believe that from the time that pronouncement was made, they must have been working with different data. What will be the starting point? Because the day a pronouncement is made is not the day it will take effect. And it may take a bit of time, unlike in the private sector where things happen so fast. In the public bureaucracy, and more so, it has to be interministerial.
Okay.
Because now you have to sit down with the Minister of Energy, Minister of Power. We don't have Minister of Energy, Minister of Power. And even Minister of Power alone cannot pull it off. He has to bring in the discourse. And don't forget, the only control that Ministry of Power has is over Transition Company of Nigeria, TCN. That is the one that government still keeps to itself. And that means it just helps to transmit from the GENCOs to the DISCOs. Now, the DISCOs have to sit with government to say, okay, these are the liabilities of each of these institutions per state. And they now have to work out from what time the intervention will start. Is it from September? Is it from October? Or is it from January 2025? Because some of these things don't happen like snap of finger. More so when it comes to issue of budget. You could see that just recently, to be able to pay 70,000 minimum wage, the president has to do supplementary budget of over 3-point-something trillion. That's even for the minimum wage alone. Then another component of 3 trillion for another thing. So about 6-point-something trillion supplementary budget. I'm not sure this 50%, because when you add everything together, it may actually run into
Trillions. Yeah.
Depending on from what time you want to start. And do you also take note of for a university like University of Lagos that said it owes 1 billion, are you going to say, okay, since you owe 1 billion, we are giving you 500 billion subsidy? Or is it going to be
500 million?
500 million subsidy? Or is it going to be prorated across to say, all of this, like Prof said, needs critical thinking. And that's why it may take a bit of time for the implementation to take off. But I think, having said that, we can't run away from the critical thinking, because that's what makes countries great. I would like to hear from both Professor Lillian Salami and Prof in the studio, how has other climes, how have they dealt with their own? Nigeria is said to be a giant of Africa. We cannot continue this lamentation forever. Yes, because we must be problem solving. Problem will not disappear because you lament about them. It's not because you agonize about them that problem will disappear. Problem will only be solved when you sit down, face it, and analyze and think out what possible solutions you want to take.
Now, talking about critical thinking, Ajide Ojo, you talked about this whole subsidy thing. I want you to look at other kinds of subsidies we've had in this country and how they have turned out. You made a point about with the amounts given to each institution be the same, spread across board and all of that. And then we know that subsidy can be a big elephant in a way, such that other things could go on in a bid to do that. Would you say that another way around this would be a better initiative, such that maybe a different tariff, or putting these institutions on a different band and not on the general band A and all of that, just so that there's transparency in the whole process?
You know, the irony of it, Larry, is that even early this year, Aso Rock itself was embarrassed when there was a threat to disconnect the light to Aso Rock for wooing. Unless I read wrongly. It was in the news. January this year, Ministry of Defense, Army headquarters, they were all owing. Huge sums of money were being owed Abuja Electricity Distribution Company. How they have been able to resolve their own, I don't know. But it tells you the story that why we single out education and health because of their critical nature. Look at federal secretariats. Go there. How has those ministries been running? You go there most times, for those who are in RIS building, you cannot even use the elevator because there is no light for most parts. And they only put on the gen for maybe 2 hours per day because of the budget constraint. So what we need to do is to start looking. This whole energy mix thing has been touted and we have been debated, and it's time to implement. How do we pilot? If it would take to pilot, for instance, what I would say is an intervention that could help is that government can say in 10 years, we want to make X number of health institutions to be self-sufficient in energy production. So let government invest, if it's 10 billion that will make National Hospital to be off the grid and produce, because we have companies, very big multinational companies that are self-sufficient in energy. They know they have to provide this energy for themselves to be able to run their businesses successfully. You get? And if we use that model, if government will have to buy the bullet, we are doing 30 trillion naira road from Lagos to Calabar. If we need to invest 10 trillion to make these two sectors energy sufficient, if we have to go and borrow that money, because as you have rightly pointed out, Larry, subsidy, there is always the corruption element in subsidy.
Yeah.
It has never really worked in the true sense of it. That's why Mr. President, one of his earliest pronouncements at inauguration is subsidy on PMS is gone. But we have seen where it has landed us. So if it will mean to have it in phases, to provide energy, that they will have a department of engineering, it will just be maintenance. It will not be like diesel, but something that may be more cost effective for them. But we are talking of renewable energy. If it's GCNG, I don't know. The experts will tell you this. Engineers, scientists, there are different energy mix, and that's why I'm talking of models from other countries, whether African or abroad. that have been deployed that have made them to be energy sufficient, because there is none of these two institutions, health and education, that can survive without. And you know the irony of it. The moment there is no light on campus, you start a looter. But Professor Lillian said something, which is something that we are running away from again, about paying more for education.
In fact, that's...
If we don't pay more to enable these institutions to be able to successfully pay their running cost, we may actually be postponing the doomsday. Because by the time, we have had our own story. We've heard from Unilag, we've heard from Prof, we've heard from other institutions.
Okay.
If we don't find a way, it's a dicey catch-22 situation. Parents are bleeding, they don't have enough. But if it will take some little additional 50,000, 100,000 marks that each student is able to pay, that will be able to help them to also offset some of the running costs.
Okay, thank you very much, Jide. Let's go to Professor Lillian now. Jide has raised some vital questions. One that I want to actually ask is, how are the universities in other climes are managing these kind of challenges? And also, he just mentioned, asking students to pay extra money. This has been a contentious issue for the past, only God knows, students not wanting to pay additional, and the university is still battling, with all these challenges. How do you, handle this kind of a situation?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me clearly state here that TED has been doing a lot in trying to revive research and development in universities. When this, of course, came up, we actually brought in all experts in the area of electricity, electronics, engineering, to come up and give us both short, medium, and long term, how we can go about getting ourselves alternative electricity source, so that we can at least less depend on these distribution companies. Now we are working on that, but I must clearly state here, the electricity generation is not a child's play. It's quite capital intensive. Last year or 2 years ago, TED took some of us, professors, to some of the countries generating their own electricity from their universities. And I think one that comes to mind is and while we were discussing, I am sure that my colleagues can even attest to the fact that the billions of dollars that went into that university just to be sure that they were generating enough electricity such that not only were they selling to their immediate companies or areas of working areas in that same country, Morocco. So what we need in the university, like I continue to say, it's not that we don't have the human resources, but we don't have the financial resources to back this. And like I said, we have put in place now committees to come up with short, medium, and long term. Now, the case of asking students to pay, that is an area we can't even go to. My university, for instance, for those of you who read about the stories and then the social media, cry of the University of Benin shutting down as a result of electricity, because the students actually demanded that they needed extra hours of electricity supply, which we couldn't meet, because at that point, BEDC, our own local distribution company, had cut us off, had disconnected us. So we were trying to use diesel to give a few hours per day, and the students didn't want that. And we were clearly told that they were not going to add anything to the school charges that they are paying now. I'm sure those who have tried, we know right now, is on because of the students not wanting to add or pay additional charges as a result of the huge electricity bills that the university is grappling with. So that is not there. So we are doing the much that we can, and I must tell you that, and I think all universities are doing that. But we need capital, we need funds to drive this so that we can also, in our own way, generate electricity. And I think ab initio, as we started, I told you the alternative we gave when we wrote a letter to His Excellency through the Honorable Minister, that we gave 3 areas. One is to return to status quo, which isn't the best thing, because that really would be a short-term, approach. The second was to have a special tariff for universities and hospitals, which are, of course, social entity establishments. And then the other one is to empower universities or empower, research development so that we can get alternative electricity. And I think unless this is done, really, these are only going to be short-term. And I have emphasized here that the 50%, yes, we welcome that, but that is not going to take us out of the woods. We are still going to, grapple with the fact that we may not be able to pay even after the 50%. I just did a quick mathematics in my own case, where I'll have to come up with 490 million per month. And it's almost impossible. I don't think we can do that. So that's where we are.
And Salami, thank you so much, for, being point blank about this whole issue and the fact that the subsidy is not even good enough. And listening to Professor Raji earlier, you talked about the fact that hospitals are bleeding. And just like Professor Salami, I would like to ask, do you think this subsidy would bring palliative care or curative care, to the problem in the hospitals? Or you think that, like Jide Ojo has, mentioned, that we should look at what other hospitals are doing in other climes and probably take a cue from them?
Yeah, thank you. The first question is if this 50% subsidy is good enough. I'd say coming from where we are, where we are currently, yes, it will help. At least, just like one of your colleagues mentioned, it will relieve the pressure, but it will not take off the problem.
So it's palliative?
It's palliative. So, but we are still happy having this, really. We are extremely happy because it will really, really reduce the pressure of us. We'll struggle, whatever it is we need to do to at least make this work. We will, definitely. But just like we said, it will be for the short term. We really need to sit down to discuss. And going to other climes to see what they do and bring it in, I think we need to be careful with that. We've made so many mistakes. There are so many mistakes that we could see. When you pick exactly what you see, a model that you see out there, to bring into a certain place. Every single environment you see has its own peculiarities. Nigeria is a very, very peculiar country. I was discussing with a friend, in my own opinion, Nigeria hardly ever goes along with any theory that you find in terms of a humanitarian theory. When you're talking about economics theory or whatever, we have put in all sorts of theories in Nigeria that works elsewhere, but will never, hardly ever work in Nigeria. Why? Because people fail to realize that every single environment has its own uniqueness. So that's why that critical thinking is really important of stakeholders. We need to sit down. Yes, it's good to have the model A, B, C from various countries, from various universities, various hospitals in other countries. But then also get experts of Nigeria in Nigeria to bring Nigerian data. See, and then we also need to learn to really run things, if you call it proof of concept, before we deploy. We are always in a rush. It's good to sit down. By the time we bring those models, we'll see, okay, model A, model B, we merge. We have our own Nigerian whatever. Then do proof of concept in 1 or 2 places before we deploy. That may be the solution. But we need to start early, for you to have such a model in everything means that you need to have some bit of time to do that. We should never be in a hurry. If you are in a hurry, we will still be falling into this same problem we've been falling in. And this is not peculiar to only the electricity, whatever. If you look at virtually a number of our situations in Nigeria, that's the same problem we are in.
Okay.
So.
Okay, Prof. Thank you very much for that. Because of our time, we still have another conversation coming up shortly. So we're just going to have a parting shot now. Jide, let me just ask you for your own parting shot. Because, I mean, no doubt this government is a listening government. The government is not only listening, but is responding, to the yearnings of the people. I mean, by responding, by giving this subsidy, also is a response, a positive response from government. So the way forward now, what other initiatives do you think the government can, adopt in this circumstance to further ease the tension, in these two critical sectors?
We've said it in all of the interventions my senior colleagues and I have said earlier. For me, I've said if we need to have an energy intervention fund, if we have to go and borrow, let's borrow to have a permanent solution. They are social sector, so if all government institutions were to charge cost-reflective price, cost-reflective bills, many of us will not be able to afford. So they have to keep the services low, and for them to keep it low, somebody must pick the bills. And that is why we need to help the institutions. I know that, yes, government is doing something, but it has to be significant because it's part of our human rights. It's part of what is in section 14, subsection 2B of the Constitution, which says security and welfare of citizens shall be the primary purpose of government. This is about well-being and welfare of citizens. So if National Hospital is accessible, it affords ordinary citizens like me opportunity to go for health care rather than going for self-medication and all of that. So we need to look for a more lasting solution. This is commendable, but I want the government to expedite action so that it doesn't become an emergency.
Okay, government should expedite action. Okay, thank you. Let's bring in Professor Salami now for just your last parting shots.
Thank you very much. Just to build on the last speaker, we thank the federal government for their intervention, but that, of course, isn't going to take wood. What might, even for the short term, is to have a dedicated tariff for tertiary institutions, and then also to invest more research. At least our research output can help us pave a way in getting alternative electricity. And I must state here that even when we go to other places to look at what they are doing, we often come domesticate. Nobody picks any research from anywhere and drive it here in the country because it may not work. So we come in here and domesticate and see how we can marry those outputs from the areas we go to pick them and then what works in here. We cannot reinvent the wheel most times, but we need to build on what has been invented. So thank you very much.
Salami, because of time, just in 20 seconds, I'd like to respond to this. I spoke with some students, on, when this broke about the subsidy, and some students were optimistic about it and hoping that universities in turn would also allow this flow to them such that charges will reduce. Do you think that's going to be possible?
But the students, what they hear on social media, they take and run with, oh yes, federal government, and so now they're going to get light for 24 hours. I have just illustrated, I've used my university, that even with the 50%, when it comes, it's going to still put us on a platform where we may not be able to survive, paying 190. It's not from anywhere. And then this same student who will be now demanding, next few weeks, you're going to see them, Aluta. Now the federal government has given us 50%. You must give us 20 hours of electricity. It's unrealistic. I said that this is a very short-term intervention. we must go beyond now. Either we get special, tariff for dedicated to universities because of our particularity, unless the students are willing to pay. And I can bet my last penny that they're not. Parents are not willing to pay because of the economic situation that we all find ourselves in. So please, we need to have a more realistic, electricity power that can make smile and bring smile to the institution, both the governance of the institution, the students, the staff, and everyone. Right now, like I said, how do you carry out research when we are still load shedding? In my university, sometimes we give 4 hours, 5 hours. Who can carry effective research work? Or even the students. So we are...
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof, for that. We have totally run out of time now. And just in 60 seconds, not more than 60 seconds, just your parting shot.
Oh, I would wish to thank the federal government, particularly the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, for taking this wonderful initiative.
Okay.
It's a big relief, and I thank all those that have pushed this to fruition. That's our honorable ministers, both for health and education, for pushing this, and the people on the ground that have also done all this. And we, as the committees of CMDs, are really happy with this, and we will ensure that, as it is now, we'll do what we can to really work with what is on ground.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mohammed Mahmood Raji, Professor of Neurosurgery and Chief Medical Director, National Hospital. Thank you so much for this conversation this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Also, let me thank our regular on the program, Jide Ojo, Public Affairs Analyst. Thank you so much for coming on Good Morning Nigeria.
Have a great weekend.
And also, I want to appreciate Professor Lilian Salami, Vice Chancellor, University of Benin. Thank you so much for your contribution this morning. Well, that's for this conversation. We'll take a break now. The second conversation will kick off immediately after the break. Stay with us.